Hello, my name is Russell Myers. Welcome to Issues Unite. So last night, Russian ships at Sevastopol were attacked by aerial and submarine drones, uh, obviously from Ukraine, and all of the drones were destroyed. Two ships allegedly got minor damage, but nothing that will take any significant amount of time to repair. None of them were sunk or irreparably damaged in any way. So the thing is that these ships were actually ships that were there to provide security for the grain passage. So, the fact that this happened now should tell you that at this point, Ukraine actually has no more grain that they can export. They would not be attacking ships that are there for the security of the grain channel if they still had grain that they were able to export. So they're done. And they were exporting grain in exchange for weapons. So now anything else that's headed to them, they don't have anything that they're contributing to pay for it at all. Now, as a result of this, now I'm going to also point out that this agreement for the grain passage was a temporary arrangement, and it was supposed to end sometime in the next few weeks anyway. But as a result of this, Russia has withdrawn from the grain deal. Russia just had a near record grain harvest. But Russia has been complaining and pointing out that, over 90% of the grain, a large part of the grain that has been exported from Ukraine and Russia, hundreds of grain ships, over 90% of them have gone to wealthy countries. A huge part of that, at least half of that grain, was supposed to go to poorer countries, such as Africa, and countries that desperately need it. Oxfam reports that there is one East African dying from starvation an estimated every 36 seconds right now. You think about that. When there is grain that has been diverted to wealthy Western countries. And Ukraine is, while the UN will talk about it, they won't do anything to get that grain to these countries. They just keep on talking. The only ones that are actually that are genuinely concerned about it seems to be Russia. It's all political, and what they are literally doing here is holding this grain hostage because these poorer countries are discussing having stronger ties with Russia and China. That's what's going on here. They are holding the grain hostage, allowing millions of human beings to die for political leverage. But even holding the food hostage has not been working. Poor countries, South American countries, all of Africa, has been colonized, subjugated, oppressed, abused in horrid ways for centuries by Western countries. They don't want closer ties to the West. They do not believe any promises that are issued from Western countries. China is building infrastructure in Africa and in South American countries. Even Mexico has refused to go along with U.S. Sanctions on Russia, and they're building stronger trade ties with China. So the unipolar world is over, period. As far as this grain is concerned, Russia has announced that they are withdrawing from the grain deal. Now, of course, the rhetoric has been that grain and fertilizer have not been sanctioned. But what has been sanctioned is the transport for the grain. Western countries refusing to issue insurance on ships that are carrying the grain from Russian ports, and so forth and so on. So Russia said that they are working on ways to get around these sanctions. Obviously, they cannot regain what grain has already been shipped to these Western countries, or the 330,000 tons of fertilizer which they said they would literally give free of charge to poor countries such as Africa. So if they find a way around this, issuing insurance to ships, using their own ships, using Chinese grain ships, if China issues insurance to these ships, if they have to, they'll probably send out warships to escort these ships safely to destinations where they can drop off this grain. What is the West going to do? Seize food? They've been known to do that. They seized a ship that was of grain that was destined for Venezuela that had 800,000 tons of grain that Russia was giving to Venezuela free of charge. And the U.S. seized that ship. Yes, the United States will definitely seize food, allow millions of people to starve for political leverage, expediency. Is this a surprise to anyone at all? You look at the history of the United States. You look at the history of Europe and the atrocities that the West is capable of. There are more people dying. There have been more people that have died of starvation in poor countries in the last 5 years. They always want to go back to Stalin, which is 70 years ago. And yet there have been more people that have died of starvation in poor countries in the last 5 years than died under Stalin at all. I find it horrid that the people that will talk about Stalin, you won't get them into a conversation about Yemen or Palestine. No, not going to talk about that. They won't talk about the 40,000 plus Americans that die every year because they cannot afford medical care or from exposure. which is above and beyond the 40,000. No. No, we can't talk about what's happening right now. We've, got to talk about what happened. I'm 60 years old, so we've got to talk about things that happened in my mother's time, my grandmother's time, and use that as some justification, for why Russians are evil. And we're the good guys, right? How are those WMDs in Iraq? Over a million dead Iraqis. The worst refugee crisis in world history occurred because of our aggression in Iraq and Syria and Libya and Afghanistan. But that's not a humanitarian crisis. No, Putin bad. These people are Putin in their pants. Always just, they need a diaper change. Something else that has been sanctioned has been aluminum. Guess where a lot of aluminum comes from? If you guessed Russia, you would be correct. Well, aluminum isn't just used in your Miller Lite beer cans. And your Coca-Cola cans. It's used for vehicle engines, vehicle parts, airplane parts, weaponry, and industrial machinery, etc., etc. So, you sanction that, you're impacting a lot of things. That can't be shipped out. I think that Russia withdrawing from this grain deal is one of the best things that they can do. Sure, it may impact their economy, but they'll have hundreds of millions of tons of food. For the rest of the world, this poses a problem. The grain ships that have already been received in the West have limited shelf life. It needs constant replenishing. The grain that has been received in Western countries, well, that's grain that was produced early this year or even last year. That needs constant replenishing. That grain, no matter how many millions of tons may be involved, that's going to run out. So what do you do when it's gone? If you don't reach a deal, an agreement, what happens to Western countries? We already see massive inflation in the United States. Well, capitalists, guess what capitalists will do if there's a food shortage? They're going to sell it to the highest bidder, just like they're doing with gas and oil right now. They will cause a shortage in the United States. If allowed, they will cause a shortage in the United States to sell it to the highest bidder. It's really no different from what happened with the Irish potato famine. The wealthy English landowners shipped out all the food out of Ireland. Otherwise, there would not have been an actual famine. It would not have been, there would have been hunger, a food shortage, but it wouldn't have been as bad. All those people wouldn't have died during that time. But they'll do that. They will force it. They will sell our food to other countries, cause a shortage here, which drives up the price here. You will have to outbid Europe for food, which will be in short supply. Meanwhile, that grain will still be sitting there in silos if it's not allowed to be moved. Russia will have food for all of next year and beyond, and they'll still be planting next year. so they'll be ready, so they'll have a food supply for years beyond that, decades maybe. Will we? Any way to know? Look at the fact that 80% of Europe has been suffering from massive drought. 2/3 of the United States was in drought this year, which reduced crop outputs. The drought in the Mississippi River is not allowing grain to move down the river. It's only a matter of time before even that may reduce the crops in the areas that are shipping things down the river. Now we've got a diesel supply problem. We've got less than 20 days of diesel to supply the entire country, or at least the East. What are we going to do? Even if you've got grain and food and whatever, how are you going to move it if you don't have diesel fuel? I think that one should be another video. Anyway, look, all of this for political posturing and still no peace talks. No, let's send more weapons. How are you going to ship those weapons if you don't have diesel fuel to ship them with? Or to produce new ones. You don't have gas, you don't have diesel. You're running up on a food shortage. You got a water shortage. But no, let's not engage in peace talks. Anyway, share this video. Talk about these subjects. Let's hope that there's a peace deal coming. I hope with every fiber of my being for that to happen every day. This is a big concern. All right? So share this video. Talk about these subjects. If you can afford it, please donate whatever you can to help expand this channel and my presidential campaign. And I will catch you in the next one. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.